Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Brett. I'm based out of Miami, PwC office, and I'm on the PwC Bookkeeping Connect team. I'm excited to have you here today. I get to have a conversation with my teammate, Mike Lister, and share with you some of our perspectives on the accounting function and how you can leverage it to grow your business.
Thanks, Brett. As Brett mentioned, I'm Mike Lister. I'm a director of Bookkeeping Connect, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And Brett and I are real excited to talk to you today. Bookkeeping Connect does outsourced back office and accounting, a lot of other services, given that we're with PwC. But Brett, real quick, somebody that I was talking to a couple weeks ago said, "That's great. I know who you are, but I want to know why we're talking today." So give me a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. There's a big why, like why I'm here. Started my career, like many accountants do, Big Four, auditing large companies, and seeing just little pieces of the pie. Um, I was yearning for more, so I went out into private industry, worked in controller roles, learned more and more about businesses, heard from business owners and what they worry about. Took that, leveraged it into an outsourced CFO role, and worked with multiple clients, helping solve their businesses, improve their businesses. And then today I'm here at PwC inside Bookkeeping Connect doing the same exact thing. So our goal is to make every business better, give business the big business advantage, and really what I'm passionate about. How about yourself, Mike? What brought you here? I know you connect with so many of our clients, know what they're going through.
Yeah, Brett, great question. So very similar background to Brett. Started off in Big Four audit. Worked with a lot of large public filers, institutionally backed private businesses, and did that for several years. I realized, kind of going through that, the amount of resources available in these big firms that we could just throw at problems. You have a crazy client situation. Okay, like let's throw some more bodies at it. You got this situation, like great, let's acquire some tech or build some tech, and put it around it. I was struck by how different that was from the experience I had growing up. My folks were small business owners. They owned restaurants, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of late nights, a lot of wondering, how are we ever going to solve this problem? How all the cash flow things that go along with that. And so was offered, given an opportunity to kind of come in and bring in some of the big firm resources that we have, focused on delivering to small and mid-sized businesses, and jumped at the chance. Super excited, just like you, Brett, to make businesses better, to give them that big business advantage that you mentioned. That's the why every day. So real excited to be doing this beside you, and excited to see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, Mike, you make a great point there. Like, you and I and our teammates, we talk about this. We get to talk to people all week long. Um, Interesting to hear your background and like solving through those problems, knowing what small business went through and seeing it in real life. Um, Curious in your conversations right now when prospects are coming to us, they, looking for help. Oftentimes they don't really know what help it is they need. So when you're talking to them, what are you hearing from them right now? What are organization leaders, business owners talking about when they get you on the phone these weeks?
Yeah, Brett, I've been talking to a ton of, over the past couple of weeks, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of family offices, a lot of actually like tech entrepreneurs, which is interesting because it's kind of a tough time in the tech entrepreneurship market right now, as rates are going high and valuations are going lower. But what I'm hearing in the market is two sides of a coin, right? They're very, very optimistic for the future. Really excited about all of the changes that are happening. The new tools that are coming out, in the market today, the opportunities for growth and scaling and going fast, is really exciting. Folks are incredibly generous on the not-for-profit side, and willing to give back and pour into the communities, which is fantastic. On the other side of that coin is some concern, about where the future's headed, and when are we going to get there? How is it going to impact me, my organization, my business, my people? Am I ready for those changes that are coming? Have I done everything I can to prepare? Do I have the right pieces of the puzzle that, when the time comes, I can react and make a move? My sense is the businesses and organizations I talk to, they're not quite ready to take that step yet into the next piece. But they're really interested in getting there. They know something needs to change, but they're just not quite sure. Are you hearing the same? We work in a little bit different industries. Are you hearing similar things, or what are you hearing in the market when you're talking to folks today?
Yeah, that's interesting. So on my side of what I'm working with a lot of private equity companies. So through the PwC network, we're helping these private equity firms make investments, and a lot of them are investing now. They're confident in finding opportunities and growth, on the front office growth side, in sales, and investing in a lot of roll-ups, finding smaller businesses, rolling them up into large ones. And so I see really the confidence on that side. Where I see their concern, and they're really where they realize they need to make investments and think about, is the internal operations. So your back office operations. Can we keep up? Can we keep the staff? Can we manage the turnover? Can we get the data to our decision makers quick enough to make these investments be fruitful and realized? So that's kind of the sides of it I see. So a lot of focus on the growth, confidence in being able to grow these opportunities, but also hesitant and cautious, understanding that the back office, the being able to provide the data and the financial backing behind it, is really where they need to make the investment and attention on.
Yeah, Brett. Two words stick out that we talk about a lot internally, right? As you're saying that, timely and accurate, right? Like what information do we need? Like, can we get it on time? And is that information reliable, and can we work with it? You were telling me something the other day, and I want to make sure that I get it right, but you've been talking to a lot of second generation business owners and maybe even third generation business owners. Are they seeing the same thing that the big PEs are? Are they having a different story?
No, I think they're saying the same thing. So they're taking over from a successful business that, generations of their family may be running well. You can't complain. Everyone is financially successful. It all feels good on the front side. But then when you look around the edges, that's where these second, third generation owners are really looking at. They hear technology disruption all over the news, like what is going to replace these jobs. So they're questioning, well, what jobs in my business are going to be replaced? How can this technology be utilized to do better? I think from that also, a lot of these generational transfers are happening like post-pandemic, right? The working world looks different. I think what we expect from our teams is different. Where our teams work from, how they input the data, how that all transfers, that's playing into all of this. And I think the ones that are really looking at the future, understanding like, how does this affect us for the future, and how can this be a positive change? We always showed up at the office. We always mailed checks. We always opened the mail every morning. That's different nowadays. And your employees that you're trying to hire and come in, the people are seeing things differently as well. So that's been a big take, in the data as well. I think data's been a big thing. I think we're seeing it a lot on the sales side and the growth side. The things you can provide with web analytics, knowing more about your customers and how you can reach your customers. And they're seeing how much innovation is happening on that data side of it, on the front office side, the helping their sales team, and wondering, how can I get that data just as fast on my financial side? How can I get my results just as quick to help me make decisions? So those are things you bring the fresh minds to these businesses, either through fresh ownership, like we said, from a PE coming in and buying a long-term business and thinking about it in a new way, or a new generation of the family taking over a family enterprise. Definitely, I'm seeing those questions. So, Mike, that's the perspective I'm hearing. Are you hearing the same, or what are you really hearing?
Largely the same, Brett. Right? You talked a lot about the growth side and the aspirations that people have, and I think that's like, hopefully it's a common quality among leaders of businesses that are always looking forward and always trying to grow, right? And so I kind of classify the folks that give me a call into two buckets, right? Those that are aspirational and like, I want to improve, like I'm looking to build for what's coming next. Like I know something's coming and I want to get want to lay the foundation and build on top of it. And then there's like the other side of the coin, that come to me and they say like, I am hurting, I am in trouble, I need some help. There's so much going wrong. I got left in the lurch. Somebody retired unexpectedly. Somebody won the lottery. I used to say I got hit by a bus, but somebody won the lottery. They left my business unexpectedly, or left my team unexpectedly, and now like I don't know which way is up. And I see lots of trees all around me, but I can't see the forest. I can't see the big picture, and I really need some help, kind of coming out of that and getting things back on track. So for either of those folks, I think the approach I have, the timing changes and kind of how we do things is a little different, but the overall approach is still the same, right? I think it's really important when I talk to these businesses and organizations is to understand where they're at. What type of tools, processes, people do they have in place? Maybe they don't have any people, and maybe they're light on processes, but they normally have some type of tool or technology in place to at least get them started. In our business, because we're all remote, right? Like that's always a place that I think about starting is how can we do more with less? In the first place, we always start as technology. So I always try and understand like where folks are, the tools that they've heard of, that they're familiar with. Are they willing to make a change? Because if they're not willing to make an investment in technology or something like that, they're probably not willing to do the work to kind of get everything else in their business correct. And so I always start there, but because there's huge downstreams on the technology side, right? If you choose a piece of tech that's really awesome, it can set you up for success. If you make a choice on technology, it can really set you back in a couple ways. So I think that's kind of where I start with advising folks. And then once we kind of get that settled, then it's a lot easier to move forward and say, okay, we've got this piece done. We understand where our tech landscape is. Now we can start getting into the fun stuff of like, okay, how are we going to get the information out timely and accurately, like we talked about? So that's always where it starts. I think it's really important in today's day and age to really think about the technology first. So technology, Brett, it's a question that we get asked a lot. I get asked a lot about, what am I seeing in the marketplace? I'm sure you do as well. And I always like to tell folks a little bit about like how we think about it. I've heard my spiel a lot. I'd love to hear, because I'm not on the calls when you're talking with folks. What are you telling folks about technology? Like, how do you think about it? Does it resonate? What are some things you're hearing from clients when they're thinking about technology?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. They come to us, and you got to be cognizant. The discussion typically, like you said, comes with something happened in my accounting firm or in my accounting operations inside of my business, or aspirationally, or an event happened, and they're like, wow, we need to come up with something new. So we have an interesting perspective, like coming from that angle. And I think when we look at technology, we look at it like a hub and spoke, like recognizing like we don't want you to make compromises across your business. We want you to find the best of breed. So we try to put like a general ledger system in the middle, like an operational system in the middle of the business, and then really help them find what's the best pieces to come in. They may have a CRM that their sales teams uses, and we can leverage that data. We really look at like how you make payments. So getting data in and getting data out, and getting payments out, so best of breed payroll provider, best of breed expense management, accounts payable, and then leveraging, maybe there's a tool, a software business, and their billing system looks a lot different than an architecture firm or a nonprofit who's got grants. So really like bringing a holistic approach to it, and helping them define, easy way to say it's a hub and spoke. All right, let's make sure we've got a place where all that data is coming in the middle. It talks to each other, and we can leverage it for that timely and accurate information and accounting data. But being respectful and recognizing that these spokes maybe have a business specific purpose, or they may need something just different than another client of ours. It also allows us to leverage new offerings. So if you're not tying everything together, it's like, hey, like something changed here, a new thing came out that we want to use, and we're just linking a new system. So that's really how we start the discussion. I think it's helpful that way, so you're not blanket replacing everything and forcing everyone into a box. It says, hey, like let's be respectful for the different teams around our business. The grant writers, the program management team in a nonprofit have a different focus than the accounts payable team that's trying to pay bills fast. These folks are trying to raise money, connect with their donors, and run events. And so I think that's really what I've learned from this, and it's like makes it the most successful technology. The business owner themselves need to look at that and say, like, how do the different people of my team interact with the system? What do they need from it? And so that's why we start with that model.
Yeah, Brett, you brought up several good points there that I was, just you talked about change management and change fatigue. You may not use those words, but managing those changes. Worked with a lot of big businesses in my old life, right? And they would come in and they would just rip and replace everything, and it's a 12-month project or a 2-year project where they come in and say, okay, every single module that you're used to working with is gone. So good luck. Do some training and let's go. I think the really benefit of big teams and high price consultants to come in and train folks, and a lot of the businesses that we work with, like they just don't have those resources. It's just a fact of life. And so that change management piece, the change fatigue that those, thinking back to those big business folks may be feeling, is much more acute in the small and mid-sized world, where if your whole world's upended, things stack up, things fall through the cracks, it gets pretty bad pretty quick. So I really like that hub and spoke analogy. And you don't have to change all of your spokes all at once, right? You can kind of go through and do it one at a time. And maybe you don't even have to change all of them, right? So I know the hub is real important. There's some really good cloud accounting systems out there. I know we use QuickBooks Online a lot and Sage a lot. There's a lot of others out there, Xero, and a lot of new ones actually that are kind of coming out, which is interesting to see in like the accounting world of like old and stereotypically like old and set in your ways. Like, this is the system I use. This is the only thing I do. So it's excited to see some new fresh entrants there. What are you seeing, or if you had to pick a technology, like where do you start? You mentioned payments. I think kind of one of the things that folks often get behind, and you got to pay your vendors or it's going to be really hard to keep a business going. It's like, what are you seeing on that end? Are you focused on anything, hear anything in the market? What are folks liking these days?
Yeah, I think the payments is interesting, right? Like everybody's business looks a little different. They sell different things, but most of them use vendors, or they have rent, they have electrical bills. So I think there's a big pickup and an opportunity in the payments. So we, like you said, we use QuickBooks Online and Sage Intacct as our hubs within Bookkeeping Connect. And our preferred payment and spend management is Ramp. So that allows you to do bill pay and like your credit card expenses all in one system. And what I found by helping our clients is that's a great area to start because everybody touches it. We have one client that they were doing, paper expense reports. So if we started going through purchase orders and expense reports and their adaptation of them, and you watched and you said somebody created this form, luckily they were already doing it online, but it was an Adobe form they created. They signed it. Then they sent it via email to their manager. They signed it, and they sent it to AP. And you thought about across the organization how many hours are spent for an employee to go on a trip, submit a report, and then get asked to be reimbursed. And you start recognizing how many people in the organization you can affect by fixing that process. So that organization, we've implemented Ramp. The sales managers, the sales leaders that are out traveling have already thanked the CFO and said, hey, like this makes our lives so much easier. And the same concept, that can go from large businesses with hundreds of people traveling down to one of our nonprofits, a smaller client, smaller nonprofit, really trying to, squeeze everything they can out of every dollar so they can drive their mission. That's what they're all focused on. And so when you found out they were using, volunteers to come in and process paper receipts, process paperwork. Like there was an easy pickup. That volunteer can now come in and send out handwritten letters to donors and help the program management team, the grant management team. So that's one we do on the spend management time. It's called Ramp, and it's interesting to see what we look at as an accounting function, right? Accounts payable or paying off tracking expenses and coding them. And you recognize how the tentacles of that spread out across the organization and how many, interact with it. We're at a very large organization. You and I interact with an expense report the same way. And AP's behind the veil. But when I get in my organizations, that's a spoke that I use that touches many people, and we can provide a lot of value in.
Yeah.
Do you have any other examples similar, or
Yeah.
what do you see on your side?
Yeah, I got some good examples, Brett. But first, I thought it was interesting. You talked about that client of yours where that one decision.
Mm-hmm.
What it sounded like is it freed up a ton of time, or like that decision made probably accounting a lot easier, which is obviously something that we care about and probably the finance team cares about. But it also sounded like there was a lot of downstream impacts in like areas of the business that aren't directly involved with finance and accounting, right? I was just thinking about expense reports and even like the early days of my career, right? Lining up all my paper receipts and taping them to the paper, and I'm an accountant, so I was tick marking them, and like tying them to my top sheet and all that fun stuff, and then I'm literally faxing them in, to give you a sense of where technology was in those days. And like how much time that just kind of got sucked up in that process and the things I had to put on the back burner during that process. And here in a big business, that's probably not that big a deal, but as you get into smaller organizations and mid-sized organizations, like all of that phantom time, like really can add up. And so think about those sales folks out there on the road. That's a couple hours that they get back making dials, meeting with folks, going to an event, or even, in the fight for talent these days, all of those things, that extra time that you have to spend at night, kind of after you log off, it probably makes a pretty big difference from an employee morale perspective too. So that was kind of cool to see that trace through. I've got a really interesting example from a not-for-profit side. So this is someone came to me and they said, "Hey, Mike, we are in a bind. We still have our audit open from a year and a half ago. And we don't know what's going on. We don't know where all the numbers come from. We just need some help." And so we started digging in and found out that they had made a decision on the tech side that had some lasting impacts. So they had made a selection from a software perspective that is a great tool, but they didn't think about all the downstreams, right? They kind of implemented like I call it a walled garden. You got the hub and spoke best of breed model, and then you kind of, in my mind, the walled garden where one system has all these different modules. Unfortunately, this organization wasn't able, not for lack of willingness or effort, but they just couldn't make it happen where everybody got all the training that they needed. And so they're using the tool that nobody understands, nobody fully understands, I should say. And everything that they did was like, because they didn't understand it, was outside of a system. And so it was manual here and manual there. And they're relying on one person to kind of take and aggregate all this data that's literally all over the office in multiple different desk drawers, and get it into this tool, this software tool, so that they could report and kind of get their financials issued. And they just weren't able to do it. It was really bad. A year and a half in, they were still finding receipts that were hidden, and expense reports actually that were like hidden in the back of a desk drawer of somebody that had since left the organization. I mean, it was a bit crazy. So we kind of came in and said, "Hey, let's think about this from the top down. Like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to issue financials. You're trying to use all these systems that nobody really understands. The processes you've had to put in place to manually overcome some of these technology issues are just sucking up all of your time and effort, and you're not able to focus on the mission like you want to because you're dealing with all this back office stuff that doesn't actually impact um, your your missional area, right? So we kind of took back and said, hey, have you ever thought about changing tools? Have you ever thought about finding a different solution? I know that what you got is great and you spent a lot of money on it, but that's a sunk cost. You spent the money a long time ago. That's great, but it's not working for you now. And it's kind of adding up every single month, the cost that you're putting into this tool. If we could change it, that'd be great. So you're able to come in, understand kind of what they wanted to accomplish, the different areas of the business and where software might be appropriate to help that. AP was a big one. They were doing a bunch of manual checks. I've still got clients with Micker printers in their office, actually, which is way old school. And so you kind of get them on a cloud AP system and some different things like that lets them work a little bit more flexibly and do some of those things. And over time, as we started chipping away, we started with the hub, obviously, and put in a good cloud accounting system. Then you could focus on the AP side, like you mentioned, Brett. Then you could focus on the payment side. And you could kind of let those run for a little while and say, okay, does everybody feel comfortable? How we doing? Let's check the pulse on everybody. Is your team good? Are your stakeholders happy? Are you getting what you need? Okay, great. Well, now let's move on to invoicing. How are you going to send out donation requests? You get a pledge form, like how are you going to collect on that pledge? And you kind of work around all the different spokes over time to kind of eventually you kind of get to this steady state of, hey, we have a system in place that's actually working. Our stakeholders like it. Our back office team likes it. We're able to issue our audit, in a reasonable amount of time. It may not be 3 months like the big public filers, but, certainly 6 months, which is a far cry from where they were. And once you get to that steady state, they've then since said, hey, we actually found a better tool that we want to place here in this spoke we want to replace. And it still connects with the hub. So, all right, we take that one out and we put a new one in, and it's really cool. As a part of that, they were able to drastically revamp their processes and pull a lot of man hours out of those processes. They took people out and kind of put the tech in. And so then those folks were able to really focus on some different things in the organization to help drive stakeholder value. And again, this is a nonprofit. So the communities they were serving were directly impacted by the additional attention that folks could give on some of this billing and other areas that they were focused on, which is really, really cool to see. So, it was really neat to see how the tech kind of cascaded down into the processes.
Right. That's interesting. I think a lot of times, it's fun to talk about the technology and implement it. Same situation. And it's funny you mentioned audit, because that's where you see a lot of times they change a process, they change a technology, and then when you try to catch up and justify it and add an audit onto your day-to-day work, that's where it all falls, kind of start seeing the red flags and fall behind. So definitely a concept that we try to do is like think about the process in place as well, right? Like we can put the technology into place, but if the team's not trained on it, if the process behind it isn't built to get the pieces moving, and to change a legacy process and improve it, it's interesting to see that's needs to be addressed during the technology. You can get your head around the technology, but like, all right, now we actually have to use it. What changes from our historical way of doing things into this new, and how do we translate those processes into the new technology?
Well, Brett, I think like the technology is kind of like like you said, it's the fun thing to talk about. It's like, oh man, I've got this really cool piece of tech and everybody wants to use this cool tool and that's awesome. But like the real work goes into, and like what really makes the technology work, because you still got to get inputs into it, right? You still have to figure out how do I get this bill or this credit card swipe into this tool all the way through the process. So like that's kind of the yeoman's work. I like to think about it, like that's where the rubber really meets the road. So once we identify, kind of that the work has to be done to get those processes in place, standardized, like the next part you have to think about is who's going to do those processes, right? Like a business is a collection of people, in technology and processes with a goal, but people are really at the core of it. And those are the folks that operate all those processes and operate that technology and interface directly with other employees and customers and stakeholders of an organization. I mean, so it's really important, I think, to take a step back and say, like, who do I have in place to help me run this organization, and what are they going to do? How are they going to do it? And you got to take a really strong look at that. What are their core competencies? What do they want to accomplish? Brett, I know you and I both work with a lot of folks that wear multiple hats in an organization. Do they want to wear all those hats? Are they good at wearing all those hats, or do they do it because they need to? And so I think it's important to take a step back and say, like, hey, what's the right people direction that we want to go in? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you hear the same thing from your clients? Because I hear it a lot.
Yeah, no, I do. That's a genesis of what, 80% of our calls. I think our aspirational folks are calling us not on a people base, but are reactionary ones, or are planning for the risk. It's a people based, right? As I mentioned, the pandemic and the changes in the way of working, like the idea that the employee took a little more power over the last 4 or 5 years, like we're all feeling that. And I think they're feeling that across that. In the accounting office, where we live and breathe and focus on is feeling even more. So it's all over the news about, how the Big Four is reacting to it. Our firm just has increased their investments, and, I think it's even high school students and college students, and bringing them into the profession, understanding what we do. I personally try to do a lot of it. I think what you and I do is very interesting and different than what a typical accounting, role looks like. But the business owners that come to us that aren't the accounting side of their function see the risk there. They understand that, if the Big Four firms are having trouble recruiting people into this, like that might be a spot that they're going to have trouble recruiting at our firm. So I often like to think about, almost the hub and spoke in this mentality too, to try to leverage that one again. But so often they've had somebody there for a while that just did everything, and they were willing to. And from that, you get a jack of all trades, right? And so depending on the size of your business and planning for growth, say, like, yes, you are handling this well, but maybe we need to go look outside. And the technology allows you to divvy stuff up and find the experts in each piece. We're big into outsourcing. Folks outsource their accounting to us. And what they're able to do is leverage somebody else inside their business, that was covering the accounting function, to do something else. So our team may focus on getting the books right, paying the bills, coding it correctly, and getting that P&L and balance sheet out. That internal team now has accurate reports to respond on. And I think that's really what, technology and then getting the right people in place helps enable, is like, we don't have to worry about those people, because the people have a discrete job. Like, we know that a team is behind us covering a lot of the dirty work and the day-to-day, like, high volume work. As a business owner, I'm focused on understanding what these mean, leveraging this information, and utilizing that to drive my business forward. So if they're bringing an outsourced firm, but also bringing somebody in place, like, understanding and aligning with that person's talents, like what the business needs, exactly like you said, the process. Like, are we creating a process that takes up all of this person's time? Can we leverage the technology to reduce their time and reallocate them to something more impactful? Yeah. That's really what I see around the people and solving that challenge.
Yeah, Brett, that's interesting. I hear from folks all the time, like, I cannot find the right person at the right price. And that seems to be the rub, right? Like, as you mentioned, the employees of firms that have, like, the power dynamic has shifted a little bit as folks have gone remote and folks are doing different things. You kind of compound that with what's going on in the accounting profession. I know PwC is running a program right now. They just finished the first one where they're, like, bringing in college sophomores, maybe, like, really early. I was not recruited as a sophomore. Maybe it's because my grades weren't good enough, but it's shifted a lot, where they're trying to get folks interested in accounting early. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal 6 or 9 months ago where another Big Four CEO was talking about there's a huge pipeline problem in the accounting space, and here's how they're trying to solve it or thinking about it. It was interesting read for some post discussion reading for folks that are interested. But I think that has a direct impact on the businesses and organizations that we work with, Brett. I hear a lot of folks that come in and say like, here's my problem, technology, whatever. But also the people side, like I need a CPA to come in and do this, that, and the other. Like I'm looking for an experienced CPA that does this. And the reality is there's a lot less of those type of folks out there in the market today, which has certainly driven the rates up. And so you talk about finding the right person for the right role and kind of what those their core competencies are and their abilities. Sometimes it does require a little bit of a shift in mindset of like, hey, I may not be looking for a CPA that's going to do everything. That's going to be really good at this. I may be looking for a person that's really good on the client side that can, I'm dealing with AR or revenue, and they're going to need to directly interface with the client, talk about billing, talk about this, that, and the other. And they may have some accounting type roles and responsibilities, but it doesn't need to be a CPA or something like that. Or, as you mentioned, it's a mix. Hey, I need somebody who's really good at this, but I can actually outsource or offshore or do something different with this aspect of my business and still meet the same organizational goals. So I think as kind of the accounting people marketplace has changed over time, I think consumers generally are much more comfortable with specialization these days. I know in my personal life, I certainly am. I'm hiring somebody to build a fence that I probably could build, but I'm just not as good at it as they are. And so kind of taking that personal side into the business side, I think the same concepts apply. And we need to be comfortable with that. Let's get an expert in and do it. And then let's find the right fit for the folks we have in the firm, reallocate, retool, whatever we can do, or leverage some of those experiences and capabilities that they may not have been required to flex those muscles before, but they certainly have the capabilities.
Absolutely. I know we have some questions here at the end. You've brought a lot of insights to this. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah, I think before we move to questions, I just, everything that when folks come to me, like I try and think about like, let's get you back on like an even keel, even footing, with all the changes that are coming up, that are, in my view, kind of starting at the top. Technologically, you hear a lot of news about all the changes happening in business, and it's going to start trickling down. It may not be ready for market for all the organizations that we work with yet, at the right price point or things like that, but it is coming, and it's coming fast and soon. So I think, if I was to leave folks with a thought, and I'm going to go back to like my little league baseball days here, but I kind of think about getting on like a ready position, right? You got to make sure you have your footwork right. You're set, your knees are bent, and you're ready to react. And if you don't feel like your business is in that position where you can react and make good decisions, you're going to get passed by. The fly ball is going to go soaring over your head, and you're going to miss it. So, that's kind of a lot of what we talked about today, and at least how I've kind of been thinking about things is, let's make sure that organizations we work with and businesses we talk to are in that ready position. So they've got the right technology, processes that are good, they're repeatable, they can flex if they need to, and that the team we got on the field in the accounting and finance space is good, and they're ready to react to what's coming. So that's kind of it. I think I'd leave you with that little league sports analogy. Yeah.
That's a great analogy, and I think that's like the key point is the adaptability, right? Being able to embrace, be it technology, different types of people, different way of staffing it, and being willing to change your processes. Exactly what you said. Success when you're looking forward right now is being in the ready position, questioning what you're doing, and being open to doing it differently. So that was a great way to sum it up.
Awesome. All right, you want to do a couple questions, Brett? Like, I know I jotted a couple down. I talked to our sales guy that's on the front lines every day. That's hearing lots of questions. Maybe you want to go first. You can go first, and then I'll take a shot.
Sure. First one I saw, and we talked about it, like suggesting that you can't have one person. I can't find the person for the right price. So what would you say their staff should look like to run their business?
That is a doozy. And obviously thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. Every business is going to look a little bit different, right? Um, you know, I'll use a little bit of hyperbole to kind of to illustrate a point here. To run my AP process, right? Do I need a team of CPAs to run my AP process? Or do I need a CPA kind of sitting over the top, checking things and issues as they come up, but I need some staff accountants, that are really that have experience in the field, that have worked with a broad range of AP tools, that are comfortable making phone calls to vendors and verifying bank accounts. Can I hire that person and then rely on a more experienced person to oversee it, versus looking for CPAs to fill out the whole roster of my AP department? So you got to find that right balance between experience and skills and cost, and that's certainly difficult to do. I think when I talk to folks about the outsourcing discussion and maybe bringing in a PwC to help handle some of this, there are hard conversations that might have to take place. And I think it's important to have that honest look. What does my business need to be successful? And as a business leader, as an owner, as a manager, like, you have a responsibility to everybody else you work with to make really good decisions around that. That decision may look like reallocation of resources, which is great. I think everybody would love for that to be the decision. Like, hey, let's get you trained up and do something different. It could be a decision that says, hey, this person is no longer the right fit for the direction the business needs to go in to be successful, to continue to serve our customers, our stakeholders, and ultimately, kind of make the whole team successful. So it's a really sensitive one, but I think it's, as leaders, it's and grown-ups, right? You got to make sometimes some tough decisions and have an honest discussion. And I think everybody's better off in the long run for that. All right, Brett, here's one for you. Okay. So how do you handle change fatigue on your clients, Brett? So we talked about change fatigue for sure, but like, give me an example. Concrete example, what do you do to manage change fatigue?
Yes. Perfect example here. One of my largest clients I've worked with over the last year and a half now had that same response to us, right? I think, leadership changes to the top. The troops are long-term wonderful employees, and kind of dealt with that fatigue of new shiny object with the new leadership. And I think what we watched was like, that new shiny object was another walled garden, or another walled garden that required manual processes. And so you took a manual process and you went from Microsoft XP to Windows 10 or whatever those dates were, but you kept doing the same thing and the screen looked different, right? I think what we were able to bring to it is like, I recognize your change fatigue, right? Like, let's find the right tool. And by finding the spokes that serve each individual piece and serve it correctly, and possibly if it changes or technology changes for that spoke, it's a smaller, pill to swallow than it is to change the entire thing. And so, like, we introduced, our systems. We referenced Sage Intacct. So we put that as the center. We leveraged some marketplace partners, is what they call it, folks to handle their retail point of sale sales, their sales tax, which is the manual process, their spend management through Ramp, and expense reports. And so, like, by using our approach of the hub and spoke and our approach to technology, we said, hey, like, we're not just picking up one process you did on a blue screen and now putting it on a black screen. We are fundamentally changing how you do your role and thinking about you and your process. So that's how I've reacted to change fatigue. Respected it, understood what they've been through and understand their efforts, and then design a new frontier that's like, hey, like, this frontier is around you. and making sure that we use your talents to the best ability rather than just putting you in front of a computer and spending more of your time. I think that was, a success story we've had around, responding to change fatigue.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking back to the phrase like "What's in it for me?" Like
Yeah.
that type of mindset for the users or the folks involved in that new process it sounds like was like critically important. They heard in the past probably like "What's in it for the business?"
Yeah.
Um, and like you kind of turned that on its head a little bit and said like, "Hey, what's in it for you, the user? This is how you're directly going to benefit." Probably impacted that buy-in from those folks, even though they're tired of going from green screen to blue screen to black screen to purple screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right, two more questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
All right. How did you deal with the what if I just invest in a new piece of technology, right? So like we get this with a PE firm that might have just bought a place that had invested in a new one, or we talked about family organization. First gen just bought something. It's been a couple of years. It never really worked. So I'm calling you at PwC. Like I just invested in technology. Why should I change now? Or what's your advice there?
Yeah, I think that sunk cost bias is very real. You've invested a big chunk of resources into a piece of tech. We're really excited about it. You got that shiny new toy that you mentioned, Brett, that you're excited to play with, and it's very natural to cling to that. But I think uh, you have to be comfortable. Like if you're at a position where you're like, hey, I've got a problem and I don't know how to solve it. I need some help, which is a great place to be because you're willing to make a change. Like you have to be open to making those changes. Um, and so I think it kind of depends, from my perspective, if you just invested in a piece, let's say you want to work with PwC, if you just invested in a piece of technology that is kind of anathema to our approach to technology, if you've just invested in a walled garden, I'm probably not going to be the best fit for you because like we fundamentally see the world in like very different ways. And the recommendations that I make about other pieces of technology are probably not going to be the right fit or involve a lot of extra cost and effort to implement. So I think um, if you've gotten to the point where you're saying I need some help, you're also probably at the point where you're like need to try and get comfortable with the fact that hey, I may have made a bad judgment call here on this piece of technology. I need to own it. Like if I keep owning it and keep digging, somebody told me the other day, like if you're digging a hole, if you're trying to get out of a hole, the first thing you should do is put down the shovel. And I think it's really key here to think about. If you've just invested in a new GL or just invested in brand new Micker printers, right? That's great, but that doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. That doesn't mean it's setting you up for success in the long term. We need to be open to making those changes. Even though, again, some hard discussions may have to take place to kind of get moving back in the right direction. All right, Brett, this one should be easy for you. We've talked about a lot of things that, let's hope it's easy. We've talked about a lot of the things that PwC does and how we serve some clients. Could you give me a little picture about kind of how PwC kind of views accounting staff, maybe what our group is staffed like and how we think about finding the right person to fit the right need?
Mike, you made some hints earlier into our staffing model and how we see it. It's finding the best people doing their highest value work. So we staff our team with with CPAs and leaders like yourself and I at the director level, and monitoring the team, engaging with the client, and then our day-to-day, like on the boots on the ground, assistant controllers, what they might look like inside a business. They're a PwC manager. Most of them have their CPA. They've had some audit experience and industry experience, similar to both of us, bringing those two things together so they can help the client. From there, we utilize resources at a bookkeeping and staff accountant level that work as a team together. So one may be really good. They've got teammates they can go to and leverage knowledge and kind of pull together all of that collective knowledge and find the best resource for each client. Um, and then economies of scale and really leveraging the team, and like you mentioned earlier, we have international facilities across PwC worldwide where we can find staff that's really good at accounts payable. I found one over there that's really good at some Excel and automating some reports in our hub and spoke. We don't have a technology like a API backend connection for one of our spokes. So we have some folks that can really help us manipulate data and make sure we're quickly getting that data into the system. So that's our model. It's exactly like you leverage. Like, let's find the people that have the knowledge, put them into the seats, and then find what task within the accounting model can we have different levels, different skill sets do to make sure we're coming up with the most efficient team.
Awesome. Brett, thanks for that. I think that's probably it for today for us. This is a really good conversation. You and I, again, we talk every day, but we don't sit down and have these nice, long form discussions about what we're hearing in the market. And so I hope that our listeners were able to kind of take some pieces from our experiences and think about how they could apply them to their unique situations and businesses or organizations. Also, would be happy to chat with anyone. If you want, feel free to reach out. We're happy to talk about what we're seeing in the market. If you've got a problem and think you're at a position where you might need some help to solve it, please give us a call. Happy to chat. But really hope that Brett and I's and PwC's broader approach to serving small businesses and thinking about the accounting function is beneficial to your organization and business as you guys think about planning ahead for the future and getting into that ready position to move forward with what's ahead. So, Brett, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.